Hey kids, today we're going to learn how to use a socket set or socket wrenches. First, let me explain why you would want to or need to use a socket wrench. With a regular wrench, you have to put it on the bolt, turn it, remember righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, and then when you get as far as you can go, you have to remove it from the bolt, put it back around, and turn it again. And as you can imagine, if you have to do this a whole bunch of times, it becomes very much a pain and very tedious and not very convenient. So, they invented the socket set, the socket wrenches. Now, the advantage to socket wrenches is you can put it on there one time and pretty much just move the wrench back and forth, and it will tighten or loosen the bolt. You don't have to take it off and do that every time. So it's much more convenient, much faster, and much easier. Okay, now let me show you the actual wrenches, the sockets, excuse me. The sockets come in many different sizes. You can see this particular set has English, which is inches, ½ inch, ¾ inch, and also some metric wrenches, 10 millimeters, 12 millimeters, etc. So those are there. Now there's three main sizes of socket wrenches in the actual wrench part, the handle, also known as a ratchet handle. I know that word has other slang meanings, but in this case it's legit. Three main sizes, and the sizes are determined by this little square part right here. This smallest one is ¼ inch. This one is 3/8 of an inch, and this biggest one is ½ an inch square. And those are known as ¼ inch drive, 3/8 drive, and ½ inch drive. Of course, the ½ inch drive is used for larger bolts. You'll also notice that the handles get longer as you go. If you remember from science class, simple machines, the longer the lever, the more strength and force you can put behind it. So bigger bolts tend to require more force. There's a couple other styles that I have here. This one has a rubber handle. This is a 3/8 drive, ½ inch drive. Here's an older model, Craftsman brand. This one is a 3/8 drive. And here's an interesting one. It's kind of curved, which allows you, if you have a flat surface, you won't be busting your knuckles on the, if your bolt is close, you won't be busting your knuckles. It'll lift it up a little bit for you. So that's pretty convenient also. Okay. Now, when you're using the socket set, of course you need to choose the socket that fits the bolt that you're working with. This is a ½ inch socket right here, and this is a ½ inch bolt. Okay. This happens to be a 3/8 inch drive, so I'll put this on the 3/8 drive handle wrench. Now, most people think that when you hear this clicking noise that the wrench is doing something. Well, it actually is not. When you hear the clicking noise, the wrench is simply going backwards so that you can go forward again. Okay, so the clicking part's doing nothing. When you turn it like this and you don't hear anything, that means the wrench is actually working. Clicking means nothing, quiet is working. Now, before you use this, you'll need to determine whether you're trying to tighten or loosen the bolt. Now, you all know, you've all heard the phrase righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So you have to check the wrench. Now, the way that you switch that, loose or tight, it varies depending on the wrench. This particular brand has a lever on the back here that you twist one way or the other, and you just have to try it. Right now I'm turning righty-tighty, and I hear that it's clicking. That means this thing is going to tighten the wrench, right? Glad you're paying attention. No, remember the click's doing nothing. When I turn right and it's clicking, I turn lefty-loosey, it's silent. So this is now set to loosen a bolt. This other set has a lever very similar. This one, I don't know if you can see this. This one has a small thing that you turn back and forth here like this with your hand. It looks like a nut actually, or a bolt. Okay, but it varies. This one has almost a star-shaped, three-pointed star-shaped thing that you also turn. Most of these sets, not this one, but this set has some ridges around here that you can grab this and use that to just turn something with your hand if you need to at any point. Okay? So, put that on the half-inch bolt. It's clicking while I'm going to the right. That means it's set to loosen. If I want to tighten this bolt instead, flick that lever. Now it clicks when I go left, and it's silent when I go forward. Tighten, nothing, tighten, do nothing, tighten, go backwards, tighten, go backwards. Okay, that's how that works. One other thing to mention is, if you find yourself using your socket wrench, and you're going back and forth like this, and you don't hear any clicking, that means you're pretty much doing the same thing as this with the regular wrench, back and forth. Okay? And generally that will happen when the bolt that you're working with is extremely loose. It's so loose that it doesn't work right. So sometimes what you can do is grab a hold of that with your hand, let go, squeeze, let go, squeeze. And that way the wrench will be able to go backwards so that you can go forward again. On some of these other wrenches that have the little grippers here, you can just do this if your bolt is that loose. Some other accessories that you will often find with a socket set are what are known as deep well sockets. You can see this wrench, this socket is a lot deeper than this one. And the deep well sockets are excellent when you have a lot of your bolts sticking out and you need to reach all the way down there and get that. Okay, of course you can use the handle, the ratchet handle on here if you need to. Some other accessories are these extensions. And this is simply a square hole here and a square end here. You would put this on here, and that allows you to reach really far in some tight areas. Okay, the extensions come in the same sizes as the wrench handles. That was a 1/4-inch drive. Here's a 3/8 extension. And a giant 1/2-inch extension. Fits the 1/2-inch drive wrench. Allows you to reach into far places. Okay. Another accessory that you might have with your sockets, and they generally don't come with a socket set like this, but are these things. Now you notice there is no round ratchet part on these. These are called breaker bars. And the purpose of these things, these don't go back and forth like a ratchet wrench. But the purpose of these is if you have to really, really crank on a bolt to loosen it or tighten it, and for example, if you're using all your strength, you're trying to crank that thing King Kong tight, I would highly recommend you use a breaker bar instead of a regular ratchet wrench. Or if you're trying to loosen a bolt and it's super tight, you're having to use all your strength, you should use a breaker bar if you have one. Because when you're putting that much force on your wrench, you can damage the mechanism inside here that does the ratcheting part, and your wrench would be broken if that happens. So if you have a breaker bar, you use that. And the way that works, put it in there like that, and you turn it as far as you can, then you just have to flop that over like that. Okay, you can also do this once you get it loosened. Sometimes once I get it loosened and I'm done using the breaker bar, I'll take the wrench socket off and use the regular ratchet handle. Okay. One other cool little accessory is this thing, and it's called a pivot. It's a pivot joint. And what this thing does, this allows you to drive a wrench. Let's try this with a giant extender. Come on. And then half-inch drive on there. And the way this works is you can kind of work around a corner with this little device here. You can kind of work around a corner. Let's say you had your bolt here like this. You could go, and that would go around a corner for you. It's hard to show here. Anyway, socket set, very handy, great tool to have. It sure beats having to do this. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.